Alrighty. Let's wait for a few people to join this video and for me to get situated. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're starting to get a few people on. I've never done this before, and I didn't realize you have to do it on the phone. So I'm trying to position it. It's plugged in, which is also not ideal because it just keeps sliding off of this table. Hi, Jordan. Thanks for waving. Alright, I guess we can get started. Full disclaimer, I'm at my grandma and grandpa's house right now, and they know about this, but they don't know what Instagram Live is. So if you hear like a Nownie, that's my grandma, and she either made coffee or is putting out like a shrimp cocktail or something. So that just forewarning in case that happens. Thank you guys for coming on. This is very exciting. Anybody who's close to me knows how much the Jim Nantz Award means to me, and I think it's such a great ambassador for Syracuse as well. And I actually emailed this to John this year because I think this is. Oh, by the way, thank you to John and thank you for Jordan for setting this up. They're doing a wonderful job. I mean, I'm like number 1 billion of all these Instagram lives, but they're very informative. So I think it's so cool that we do this practically every day now. And if you have any questions, of course, send it in the chat. My DMs are open on Twitter, and I think Instagram. I have my computer next to me, so I could check the DMs on Instagram and Twitter and all that jazz. Yeah. So I'm not too familiar with the Instagram game. It's relatively new to me. True story. I signed up for Instagram back in I think September because one of my friends who I was working with on the Cape this summer, she said it was very I don't know the word she used, but I guess old of me that I didn't have an Instagram. I was on Facebook and I was on Twitter, but that was about it. And she goes, Jonah, you're never going to get a girlfriend if you're not on Instagram. And I'm like, I don't know the science behind that, but I'll look into it. And ever since then, I had an Instagram. And for the first 2 months, I posted 4 pictures in total, and I haven't posted anything since October. So that's how involved I am at Instagram. This is my first Instagram Live. So again, thank you to Jordan for helping me set this up. Where should we begin? I guess my bio, for those of you who don't know me or know very little of me, I attended Syracuse. I graduated this past May. I was involved with WAER, the radio station, Z89, the radio station, ACC Network Extra, and Citrus TV. And I went to Newhouse. And I will tell you that it's the best decision I ever made. And it's the only... I applied to 2 schools out of high school. I applied to Syracuse, and I applied to Penn State. Those were the only 2 schools that were on my radar for 2 reasons. 1, they're 2 great communication schools. And 2, my mom went to Syracuse and my dad went to Penn State. So I had that pinned up against each other. It doesn't help that they're divorced, but that was a fun battle for a few months. But my heart was always set on Syracuse. I wanted to do sports broadcasting. That was a dream. I was involved in the radio station at Syosset High School, same radio station that Judd Apatow was involved in at Syosset High School. Not that I've ever met Judd, we have that one connection, that's about it. So name dropping him does nothing for me, but we went to the same high school. Also, Natalie Portman went to Syosset High School. WKWZ was that radio station. I called football and basketball and baseball while I was in high school, and I had my own sports talk show with my good friend Joe Serralo, who just graduated from St. Bonaventure. And it was a very quick decision for me to want to become a sports broadcaster because I wasn't that involved with a whole lot in high school. I did the radio station, and I was in jazz band. Didn't like playing the saxophone. I did play the saxophone for 9 years, but it wasn't a passion of mine. And I was a shy kid in high school, and I really found my voice at the radio station. And I knew this was what I wanted to do with my life. And so my heart was set on Syracuse, and thank goodness I got into Newhouse. And, we were off and running. After that, I will say the big question that entered my mind when I was applying for schools, and ultimately when I accepted Newhouse, or I guess they accepted me, I was concerned, because I'm very much an introvert, that I would be going to a school where there were a lot of kids, or adults, students, that wanted to do the same thing that I wanted to do, which in one sense is good, but also it's very easy to get lost in the fold. It's very easy to get lost in the shuffle. So it was a question of, do I really want to go to a school where I know that I'm going to be a little fish in a big pond, or would I rather go to a school where they have a good communications base and certainly an opportunity to call sports, but I'd have more opportunities there, and I'd have more of an ability to stand out, rather than at Syracuse, where the competition's immense, and it's more likely that you just decide, you kind of get lost in everything. Now, I never really thought about it to an extent where I said to myself, well, maybe Syracuse isn't the right decision for me. I was always set on Syracuse, and I was excited to go. And circling back to where I was before, when I was shouting out Jordan and John, what this award does for Syracuse is, and this is when I get on my pedestal and praise Syracuse until the cows come home. The reason I went to Syracuse, I wanted to be the next Bob Costas, Mike Tirico, Ian Eagle, Marv Albert, you name it. The list goes on and on. Their alumni base is tremendous. But what this award does is it turns Syracuse from a museum of the greatest sports broadcasters of all time into a factory that produces and continues to produce great broadcasters to come. And I'm not just, speaking for my class, but, Drew won last year, and Noah and Evan Stockton he came in second the year before, and he was a back-to-back All-American. There are guys that have come out of this school in the last 10 years that are going to be dominating the industry for years to come. And this award proves that Syracuse, just go back and look at the list of all the incredible talents that have come out of Newhouse the last 10, 11, 12 years. How long has this award been going on? It's been over a decade. But there are going to be kids in high school 15 years from now, 20 years from now, that are going to be saying, I want to be the next Drew Carter. I want to be the next Noah Eagle. And that's very cool to see. And this award highlights that. So, anyway, back to my biography. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to put those in the comments section. Or again, you could shoot me a DM. Like I said in my tweet, I'm an open book. I can talk about anything. I'm willing to talk about anything. And I will get into the psychological side of broadcasting, because, quite frankly, it's something that needs to be talked about, and it's something that isn't talked about enough. Mental health is a big factor, because there are two big tools that you need to protect at all costs if you want to go into sports broadcasting. That's this, and that's this. Your voice and your head. That being said, let me get back to my bio, and I can open it up for questions really at any point. Thanks again for tuning in. So I went to Syracuse, graduated this past May, and like I said, it was the easiest decision I ever made and the best decision I ever made. Ooh, how about this? In terms of being an introvert, how are you able to come out of your shell to benefit yourself as a broadcaster? From Jay Neasy 30. Well, thank you for that question. Great question, because it's funny as I study broadcasters. A lot of them are in their natural state introverts. Anderson Cooper is an introvert, and there are a lot of them like that. But what I've discovered is when I get on the air, when I get in front of the camera, or when I get behind the microphone, I try to be the best version of myself that I could possibly be. So that helped me come out of my shell. And as I became more confident in my voice and my appearance and my abilities as a broadcaster, the confidence translated into me starting to crawl out of my shell. But it took a while because when I first got to Syracuse, there were a lot of people I looked at and I said, I want to be that good. I want to be as good as Drew or as good as Evan. And I watched them and I studied them and I said, well, Drew holds a pen in his hand, so I'm going to start doing that. And that it was little things like that turned me into sort of an amalgamation of everybody I watched, and then I had to take every little thing I learned and then turn it into who I wanted to watch as myself. And it was a very hard and very long and drawn out process, but it goes to show you have to really want it if you go into this industry, because it takes time and it takes patience. And I'm still an introvert. I don't like crowds. I get very quiet and very shy in crowds. But there are certain things and certain environments where I feel comfortable, and so being in front of the camera is one of them. And it took time to discover that, but that was validation that this is what I want to do with my life, because I know that part about me. I know that I am an introvert, but the fact that I can then go in front of a camera and highlight this personality and step in front of the spotlight and have fun doing it, that to me was validation that this was the right career choice for me. That was a long answer. From Carp Chad, I see you went to the Super Bowl twice. What was that like? Thank you, Carp Chad, my father. Thanks for the support. It was, to clarify, I never actually went to the game. I attended Radio Row. I attended Media Week for 2 straight years, the last 2 years. And it was both times 2 of the busiest weeks of my life, but 2 of the most rewarding and most fun weeks of my life. That was a very, well, it was an easier process than I had envisioned. You think, oh, the Super Bowl, it's the biggest stage in all of sports. It must be very hard. And they do weed out a lot of candidates, but all you have to do is really submit an application, submit reasons why you need credentials, and it's not that difficult. The hardest part about that process was booking flights and booking hotels, especially in Miami. It was very, 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 very difficult to figure out the housing situation and something that was semi-affordable. And we were actually helped out a lot by Howie Deneroff, who continues to be a close mentor of mine. He both years he's just been a tremendous help, and if you can't talk about the Super Bowl without shouting out Dennis Denninger and Olivia Stomsky, also 2 great helps. Thank you for the question, Father. And again, any more questions are welcome. You just throw them in the comments section. Again, shoot me a DM if you want to. I don't have to. I don't have to read out your name. I mean, if it's in the comments section, everyone can see it. But if you want your voice to be private, if you want to ask me a private question, you can email me at carpjonah@gmail.com, or you can shoot me a DM. Because I know how I don't like to raise my hand in class, and that's been a thing for a long time. I had to go to the guidance counselor in junior year of high school because I refused to raise my hand in class, and part of the reason it became a big deal was we were graded on how often we talked in class, and I would willingly take zeros and these were quiz grades, and that was like 30% of my grade. It added up. So to not fail 11th grade English, I had to like make a deal. Anyway, what's your favorite AER memory? Thanks, Jenna. Jenna Fink. She placed this year. Congratulations to Jenna. She's an awesome talent and somebody you should watch out for in the years to come. What's your favorite WAER memory? That is a good question. There are a lot of them for sure. This year, I got to call a game at Barclays Center. This was actually so every year. Usually, what happens every year, Syracuse plays at the Garden typically in a tournament. This year, they played at Barclays Center and they played Penn State. Which, as I mentioned earlier, if you're just joining us, you missed that beginning part. But I only applied to 2 schools, and that was Syracuse and Penn State, and those are the alma maters of my parents. And they hadn't played since the 80s. It used to be a big rivalry, but this was the first time they were facing each other since the 1980s, which was very, very cool. And so a year ago, when this schedule came out, I asked Jack, who was our sports director at the time, if it would be possible if I could call that game, and he said, "Yeah, let's lock it in." And it helped that it was right in my backyard. I'm a Long Island kid, not right in my backyard, but Brooklyn is relatively close. We actually do have some questions in the docket. How about this? Well, let's get to this one first from Coach Mitch 4. So what's your thoughts? Do you think the NBA season really plays out with the COVID and all? Well, thank you for the question, Mitch. It is a good question. And the latest report today is that Kyrie Irving isn't going to be participating in Florida. And I mean, especially with the Nets. I mean, DeAndre Jordan, Kevin Durant had it. Spencer Dinwiddie. The Nets it seems like they're not. They've started. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that sentence. They're not healthy. It's hard to tell. It seems like they have a plan moving forward. Just if you have guys who have the virus that have been exposed because they're training with other guys who have the virus, or you just don't know if you could be a carrier without a symptom, and it's a big risk. I think they're going to start the season, but I don't know how long it's going to go on. Obviously, there aren't going to be any fans. It's a tricky situation. I don't have the answer by any means, and I'm certainly not involved in the meetings. So I'm not going to just spew out an answer out of my butt. But yeah, I mean, if I were to predict something, I think they're going to start it, and hopefully it can continue. But thank you for the question, Mitch. Let's get to some of these questions that are queued up. What's your favorite part of broadcasting a game? From Max. I love storytelling. It's my favorite part of prepping. I try to go into each game with a few stories for each player. It's harder to do in football because there are so many different characters, but certainly the main players. With baseball, I have 2 storylines per inning. So I try to find interesting and unique stories that are relatable because people like human interest stories. So my favorite part is telling a story that people would find interesting and figuring out how to weave that into the broadcast. Also, I don't know if any of you guys ever do this, but I love to... There are 2 parts to this. One, I love finding words to mix into the broadcast, words that I would want to use more. Usually they're verbs. The drawback to saying that, well, I want to use the word probes more, is you end up using it 17 times, and then it's like, well, I can't pull anything from this game because I use probes way too much. It's a good word, but it's not good for a tape. So there's that. But also, I like when I'm on the other side of the broadcast and I have friends calling the game, I like getting in the IFB and going, hey, work in salmonella if you can. Love doing that. It's a fun game, especially in a blowout. Those are fun games to play. Ian asks, what are the most unique opportunities at Syracuse that they provide students with? Okay, thank you, Ian. Good question. Unique opportunities, ACC Network is a unique opportunity for sure. I know there are a lot of schools that allow you to get on like the Big Ten Network or SEC Network, I think. But so I guess it's not unique in that respect, but it's a professional opportunity that you're getting as a student. So that would be the premier unique opportunity that Syracuse offers. The coaching that they do at Syracuse, the mentorships at Syracuse are unparalleled. And it's not just the professors. The professors are tremendous. The professors at Newhouse and everyone you come into contact with, and it's not just the professors. You have people who've worked on the Syracuse beat for 30 years who become very close and good mentors. But it's also your peers that have gone through the same sort of boot camp that you go through, and they don't put anybody on air that isn't ready to be on air. So yeah, the stigma with Syracuse is that, well, you're not going to get on air until your junior year, which isn't totally true, but you're probably not going to call a men's basketball game until junior year. But the reason for that is that everyone we put on air is polished, and that's why we have the track record we do. Syracuse does. I'm an alumni now, I can say it. But that's what you get when you go to Syracuse. You work very, very closely with your peers. You're coached by your peers and your professors. You get great advice, and you walk out of that school a 400 times better broadcaster than you walked into the school with. So that in and of itself is a tremendous opportunity that I'm sure you get them at Mizzou and at Arizona State to some extent, but I'd be shocked if it's at the level that Syracuse provides. Let's get to some of these. How do you prepare for a game? From Barry Michael Wine. How do you prepare for a game? Is it different depending on the sport? Good question. It is. My chart looks different. The rules are different depending on the sport, but it's the same foundation for every sport, and that's you need to. And the hardest part about prepping for a game for me is memorizing names and memorizing numbers. I make a Quizlet, and this is for every sport that I do. I make a Quizlet, and I put the number on one flashcard, and then on the back I have the name, and all week I'm trying to memorize it, and it's very, very hard for me to do that. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And I try to find, like for basketball, for instance, usually it's a chart of about 12 players, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. And I have stats, season stats, previous game stats, 2 games ago stats, and then interesting storylines about that particular player. And then I have storylines. I watch the press conference from the previous game and the game before. The coach's press conference, any player sound that I I can find. And I try to go into each game with as much relevant knowledge as possible. And the truth is that you're only going to use about 25% of your prep work. And if you're using more, it's either a blowout, a really, really slow game, or you're probably using most of it in the first 10 minutes. And that's an Achilles heel that I've found in myself a lot of times, especially the more I think about a game leading up to the game itself, the more I'm like, I'm so excited to say this and I'm so excited to say that. And what ends up happening is that I just throw up my entire chart in the first 10 minutes. So try to avoid doing that. Try to spread it out and say relevant things as they come organically. This is something I found in basketball. One of the tapes I thought was good, but then I went back and listened. I think it was Buddy Boeheim at the foul line, and I was talking about his 3-point shooting. And maybe to a listener who's kind of drifting in and out, listening in his or her car, it might not sound like a big deal. But when you think about it, why are you talking about the 3-point shot when the guy's shooting free throws? It's a little, it just doesn't make sense. So, it's finding unique storylines, but also figuring out the right places to put those storylines. So again, a long-winded answer to how do you prep for a game, but thank you for that question. Can you describe what type of gear you've used in broadcasts, mixers, headsets, good cables, mics, recorders? Any favorites or recommendations? Well, I have least favorites. My first year calling baseball, it was after my freshman year of college. And this was a great experience, and I'm very, very grateful for this experience. I was calling games for the Hamptons Collegiate Baseball League. The equipment was non-existent. I called every game from my phone, and I had earbuds in, and I had to bring a table, and I had to bring chairs, and we would try to position the table and chairs as close to home plate, but also enough distance where the players in the batter's box wouldn't hear us. It was an experience for sure. And I think Meridics was that system, which was a good system, but the quality wasn't ideal. I love OBS. I've used that the last 2 summers. Last year on the Cape, we used OBS, and Javik Blake was our producer for the Wareham Gateman. Javik did an Instagram live a week ago or a few days ago, and he did a great job. And he's missing out on the Cape League summer, just like a lot of people are, and I feel for him. My heart goes out to all of you. But that being said, he was our producer, and he was using his own laptop last year, and we were using OBS, and we were using an audio mixer, and it was very heavy-duty equipment. And I think 3 games or 4 games into the season, we were at Falmouth, and all of a sudden, after inning 3, the computer dies, and we're like, well, that's not good. What do we do? So we couldn't call it. We couldn't finish the game. As it turned out, the computer was completely fried, and the audio mixer, and it was some sort of spark that happened. And this has nothing to do with even your question, really, but it's a story for sure. We were waiting for weeks to get Javik's computer back, and I think we ended up skipping a game. Maybe we didn't skip a game. I don't really. Maybe there was a rain out because early in the season where there were a lot of rain outs. But it took us days to get a lot of that equipment back, and it cost us a couple $100. But that was the best equipment that we used, or that I used in my last 3 summers calling baseball. For school, for every road game, we use a Comrex, and those are as clean and as useful as they come. The Comrex is, I'd invest in a Comrex. That would be my go-to if you're just starting a broadcast. But I'm not anywhere close to an IT guy or anybody who knows that much about technology. And there are certain people, I'm sure you can Google what a good quality headset is. I've used good headsets and I've used bad headsets, and I should know the difference between who makes a good headset, and I don't. But that got me interested, and I will look that up. But thanks for the question. I hope that was somewhat helpful. I don't think it was. From Jason Herman, in what way has SU prepared you? Oh my goodness. My phone almost fell. In what way has... And it fell again? See, like I said, I'm at my grandma's house. This is positioned between a flower pot and a lamp. Both antiques, both very nice, but not the most stable. In what way has SU prepared you for the inevitable changes and new technologies that will come along in the broadcasting industry? Thank you, Jason, for that question. Jason Herman is a good friend of mine from Syracuse. We started a podcast back in sophomore year called The Back Pages, and we did 2 episodes of The Back Pages before calling it quits. Good times. Jason and I, we found, and this goes back to that rumor that maybe some of you in high school have heard if you're thinking about applying to Syracuse, that you can't get on air until junior year of college. Jason and I started calling games at Lemoyne when we were freshmen. Lemoyne College, which is about 5 minutes down the road from Syracuse University. We would call lacrosse games, and we'd call... What else did we do? They had opportunities for soccer. I don't think we ever did soccer. We did baseball. I did women's basketball. There were opportunities at Lemoyne that we weren't getting at Syracuse. So the reality is, and this is wherever you go, and really whatever you do, even if you're not doing sports broadcasting, if you want to do something, you can make your own opportunities. You don't need to wait for things to be handed to you. Even if an opportunity like Lemoyne isn't at a school where you want to go, you can go into the stands and record a tape and then listen to it back and be like, I really hate the sound of my voice. I'm going to go do that again. That was what I did. And when I got to Syracuse, I had oh my goodness. Now I'm going to unplug the charger. It must be charged at this point. That's really the problem. It's just, it doesn't have a steady base. Okay, that's better. Anyway, where was I? So, when I got to Syracuse, I had a high voice, I had a nasally voice, and I had a lisp, and I hated the sound of my voice. And I remember talking to my advisor, my mentor at the time, who was one of my peers, and I'm like, I don't like how I sound. And we were playing with the voice and enunciating and trying to figure out different ways. But what it came down to was I studied a lot of people who I thought had great voices. And Drew and Noah, they were 2 of them. But it was also professionals. You know, Kevin Harlan, I think, is the best in the business. Jim Nance, guys who have a great baritone to their voice and a very clear voice. And I really tried to figure out what makes these people, who I think are great. And it just took a lot of work, and I enjoy singing. I'm not good at it, but I like singing in the car and singing in the shower, and it helps you manage and prepare your voice. Don't overdo it, but it can help you get into a good position to work on your voice, and that's how I developed it. And for a little while I tried to put on a broadcaster voice, and it sounded very fake, very disingenuous, and I wanted a voice that sounded more authentic. And again, like with everything else, it was a process, and it took years. And it really wasn't until the second half of my junior year, where I listened back to a tape and I'm like, that doesn't sound too bad. So that was a big confidence boost. Ian Nichols, thanks for answering my Q's question. Oh, you're welcome, Ian. What was the most embarrassing thing that happened to you while you were announcing a game? Stuart Gross. Okay. Well, there are a few things, actually. And let me preface this by saying that I've had embarrassing things happen when I was announcing games, but they were also, what I learned afterward, they weren't uncommon. I wasn't the only person who this happened to. So here was the first one. My first ever ACC Network broadcast was a field hockey game at the beginning. Well, full production. I had done a softball game the year before. But full production ACC Network game was a field hockey game junior year in September. And I was very nervous for it. It was Syracuse and Duke. I had prepared a lot for it. Didn't know field hockey at all, but I was very, very nervous. And we had practiced the open because I'm like, I just need to get through the open. I'd never done anything like that before, and the rest is just calling a game like I would call any other game, and that's where I'm most comfortable. So we had practiced the open a number of times, and it had gotten progressively better. We did it like 3 or 4 times. And it was about 5 minutes of the broadcast before they're like, we'll just do it live. And I'm like, oh boy, I was really hoping they would tape one of them and use it. So we ended up doing it live. And how it works is there's a monitor in front of you that rolls B-roll, and you have the IFB in your ear and the producer saying, okay, go. And then you start talking over the B-roll, you turn to the camera, you welcome in everybody, you turn to your analyst, all that. And so we're about to go. I'm getting the countdown from the person running the camera, and he points, and I see the B-roll, but I don't hear go in my IFB. But I start talking anyway because the B-roll's running. So I do the script. I'm going through it. The B-roll ends. I turn to the camera, and I'm waiting for the cue, start talking. And it never comes. So I'm just staring at the camera for a good maybe 7 seconds. And my analyst, Tracy, love her to death, she's looking at me and then looking at the camera and looking at me and looking at the camera. And I'm just frozen because I'm like, do I talk? Is there something wrong? As it turned out, my IFB wasn't plugged in. So that was one of the first and easily the most embarrassing thing. Maybe not easily. There are a few other stories that I'll get to. But it is one of the most embarrassing things that's happened to me. And because it was a big deal to me. It was the first ever ACC Network broadcast I did. And to me, I botched it. And it was over something as elementary as not plugging in the IFB. Now, the reason I say it's not uncommon, it's not uncommon. But I found this out recently. A similar thing happened to Joe Buck when it was, I think, his first TV Cardinals game when he was 21, 22 years old. And it was, now I'm trying to remember, I think there was a delay. I don't really know the story, but I'm sure you could fact check me on any of this. And he had to send it down to the field reporter. And he was waiting for the cue. The IFB fell out of his ear. And he was on camera. And he didn't know. Mind you, this was his first TV broadcast as well. And a much bigger stage than an ACC Network Extra field hockey broadcast. And he says, he got through it. Probably a sweaty mess, but he got through it. And it's one of the most embarrassing things to happen to him. And when I read that, I just got through his book. When I read that, I'm like, that's so interesting, because the same thing happened to me. So thanks, Stuart, for the question. That's certainly up there. I had another ACC Network broadcast. I was doing a soccer game, and close game, tie game, 1-1, all the way down to the end. and we're sending it to break because it's about to go into overtime, and I go, final score 1-1, which makes no sense because we were about to go into overtime, and I was kicking myself for that for a long time. And that was very embarrassing. But a similar thing happened to Brian Anderson, who I think is, again, one of the best in the business. This was a number of years ago. He was calling a basketball game, and someone put up a shot, and he said for the win, and it wasn't for the win. And that was something that he sat on for a little while. And the reality is you just can't let stuff like that get to you because the more it lingers, it carries over into the next broadcast, and it hurts your confidence, and no one wants to listen to somebody who's not confident in what they do. So thank you for the question, Stuart. Emmanuel, HCBL. Yeah, Emmanuel. I met Emmanuel in the Hamptons League. He was going into college. I had just gotten out of my freshman year, and he was going to Fordham, and we remained close ever since. And congratulations to him on what was one of the best years, I think, that a broadcaster could have, winning the Marty Glickman and then coming in being an All-American for the Jim Nantz Award. He's a good guy, and he's tall. I'm on a good day, I'm like 5'8". We have this one picture where it looks like I'm standing in a hole because Emmanuel is just, I don't know, maybe 6'3", but the discrepancy is a lot. So I try not to show that picture to too many people because I look very short. You mentioned mental health in terms of broadcasting. How does mental health play a role in it? Okay, thank you, Coach Mitch. Yeah, so I struggle a lot, and I have for a while, with anxiety and depression. And it's reached a point where I do take medication for it. That being said, what I learned about that is what that is a lot of energy, and it's a lot of negative energy that, because of the competition at Syracuse, and I mean the competition in general, and the constant comparisons, when you pin yourself up against other broadcasters and maybe say, well, I want that opportunity, how do I get that? Why am I not getting that opportunity? How do I be that good? Why am I not that good? Those thoughts end up turning into negative thoughts, and they feed into that negative energy that maybe in the past didn't have anything to do with broadcasting, but it channels itself into broadcasting. And this isn't true for everybody, and certainly anxiety has different levels of severity. But for me, for my personal experience, what happened was I just became fixated on everything I was doing wrong and certain things that I wanted to do better. And I shut people out. I just became consumed in this craft, which to some extent was helpful because I was only improving. I was getting better, and I really wanted to do well, and I was laser focused. Where it hurt me was that I hated myself. I hated not wanting to see people and talk to people, and really shutting out everything I felt was a distraction to sports broadcasting. And a lot of people who I've spoken to, they something similar goes on in their head. It's very hard, especially when you go to Syracuse. It's very hard not to compare yourself to people and not get caught up in that competition. But you have to, and this goes back to confidence, and this goes back to the tools I mentioned, protecting your voice and protecting your brain. You have to put yourself in a position where you are the best and most confident person when you step behind a microphone. And I felt for a long time I was putting on an act, and I was playing this character who was this confident and witty person and broadcaster, when he would step behind the microphone, but then I would retreat back to being an introvert. And it was almost like I had two different personalities going, and that was very hard to balance. And it was very exhausting. So it wasn't until, and my dad, who's watching, he said to me recently, this to me a number of times, he goes, you've done everything you possibly could at Syracuse. And to some extent that's true. But the thing I'm most proud of that I took advantage of was the mental health services, because I wouldn't have been able to get through senior year. And granted, this was my parents' idea and I was against it, but it was the most rewarding thing that I've ever done. Because one of the first things they told me, I was very scared. I was at my worst last April-ish. I was in a bad mental place. And I was very scared that if I were to seek help and try to get myself fixed, that I would lose a lot of that focus that had carried me that far. And what I was told by my therapist, and this was echoed by actually a few of my mentors, was maybe it's not the anxiety and the depression that's propelling you forward. Maybe that's the thing that's holding you back. Maybe you are that guy who's confident and witty, and that is you. Maybe it's the negative thoughts and the negative energy that's actually inhibiting you from being the best possible version of yourself that you can be. And once that clicked, and it did take time for it to click, I realized that she was right. And when I realized that making sure I was in a good mental state, a great mental state, going into each broadcast, I was only getting better. And that focus and that drive, that was me. And that wasn't for a long time it was coming from a negative place, but it didn't have to. And once I realized that, it was very helpful. And I do encourage anybody who is struggling with anxiety and depression, and it's a real thing, I encourage them to, you could reach out to me again, carpjonah@gmail.com. I'll answer your emails. We could talk. You could shoot me a DM. But there are a lot of videos on YouTube, and this is a very common thing with the entertainment industry. If you're in the spotlight, you feel those eyeballs on you. It's a hard thing, and it's hard for the mind to grapple with. So Kristen Bell has she has a great video on YouTube. She did an interview with Sam Jones, who isn't a common name, but Sam Jones, if you go on YouTube and you look up his interviews, he does, I don't know the name of his channel. It's like Off Camera or something, but it's in black and white. He strips down pretty much everything, and it's good symbolism, because he gets, much like Howard Stern, who I'm a big fan of, he gets the interviewee to open up and talk about things that maybe you wouldn't hear otherwise. So he does this one with Kristen Bell, who says something to the effect of, you wouldn't deny a diabetic his insulin, why would you judge somebody who's struggling with anxiety if they need medication? And it's true. It's a real it's a real debilitating thing that people go through. And Bill Hader is another one who I'm a huge fan of. Love Saturday Night Live. I have yet to see his show Barry, but that's on the list of shows I need to watch. And he says, he for my money is the best personality to come out of Saturday Night Live in the last 2 decades. And he opened up about how bad his anxiety was, and before every show, he would have these panic attacks, and he didn't know what to do with them. And eventually what he did was he almost treated it like a pet. And he said, okay, there you are. He identified it, And he said, there you are, come sit on my shoulder, and you're going to be with me. Because you can't ignore it, because then it'll just pop up when you least expect it and you don't want it to. So don't ignore the anxiety. Poor connection. Okay, there we go. But that's what Bill Hader does. So a lot of people give very, very good advice, and I encourage you, if you're curious about it, I encourage you to go look that up. Favorite guest on the Pepsi postgame show in 2017. I wish Eric Callahan was good. I don't really remember Cam Climo. I don't really remember too many names from the Hamptons League. Thanks for the question, Emmanuel. How did you go about your prep process for calling games on the Cape? My prep process, and I think these only go for an hour, by the way. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if Jordan's going to text me and confirm or deny that. Again, first Instagram Live. But we're already at 51 minutes. I think Drew still holds the record. Then Noah had the record, and then Drew took that over, and we can keep going as long as you guys want to. I'm happy to talk, and I could talk for a very, very long time. How did you go about your prep process for calling games on the Cape? Well, it's similar to really any other sport, like I mentioned earlier. What I did was I had this routine going. I was living with a host family, Marion and Mike, and Addison and Gabe. Gabe just got engaged to Paige, lovely couple, and wish them all the best. Wedding is next year. So I had this routine going where I would wake up, drink a cup of coffee, eat a banana, which I still do every single morning, and I would do a Sudoku puzzle, which I still do every single morning, and then I would start on my prep, and I would print out the rosters for the two teams I was calling a game for, and I would write the stats in I would write their season stats in, and then underneath do a previous game stats. And a lot of people do this in their scorebook. I do this in advance before I know the lineup. And usually if I have some space, I'll do one or two bullet points of like an interesting factoid that I could use. And most of the time it's good to have that with pitchers, because they're going to be on the mound for the starting pitcher is going to be on the mound for like 5 innings. So when you mention his name, you might want to have like 3 nuggets prepared. So when you circle back to him, maybe just like throw that in. So that's what I try to do. And for each player, it's like 1 or 2 different storylines as well. So once it became a routine, it didn't take all that long. But going into the season, we were swapping emails and tweets and texts with some of the other broadcasters to try and get information from them about their respective teams. Because there's only so much you could find online, and if they were attending practice and standing next to them down on the field, maybe they picked up a few nuggets that we could then use. Well, thank you. Thanks for the support, guys. There are some other... Okay, I think... Well, the Wi-Fi in this house is not ideal. I love my grandparents. The technology side of their brain is absent. Jake says we want fashion advice. I'm not good with that. I've gotten better over the years. And this year I revamped my wardrobe. But you ask me if something matches, and I don't know. I'm really not good with fashion advice. I like the skinny ties. I'm not a fan of the wider ties, but I don't know. That's about it, I guess. Carlos asked, did you ever work a game with Noah or Drew? No, we never did any games together, me and Noah or me and Drew. I went to the Super Bowl. I went to Media Week with Drew. So we spent a week in Atlanta, which was very, very fun. And oh, thanks, Max Schneider, my roommate for 2 years, looking good today. I did go with the blue sweater. So that was very, very fun. We were on the radio every single day together, Drew and I. So if it keeps pausing for you guys, it keeps pausing on my end. Luke says, "Who are you and what do you?" Yeah, thanks for the support. It keeps going in and out. That's so weird. Hopefully, it doesn't keep doing that. Yeah, I mean, I could talk a little bit about constructing the reel. What I based it on, and we only have 5 minutes, I think. If this cuts out after an hour, we could always start a new one. But my junior year of college, when I was making my first ever reel, I was watching previous years and who I thought did a good job, and the one that stood out to me among everyone was Katie Emmer. I thought her reel was it was unique, it was different, and it was exciting. It was quick. You saw her personality, you saw her talent immediately off the bat, and I wanted something that showcased my personality and showcased my ability. We just got mentioned by STAA. Yeah, let's try and go for the record. Anyway, I get distracted very easily. My dad can attest to that. He's still on this. I'm surprised you're paying attention as long as you have, Dad. I'm sure he has something else going on in the background. Anyway, so where was I? Oh, putting together the reel. So for the last 2 years, I really wanted to carve out a reel that showcased, well, I had two things in mind. I wanted to be versatile, and I wanted to highlight the things that I thought set me apart. So junior year, I had this little 1-minute package that I put together from opening night at the Super Bowl that I figured, well, nobody else has. So I'm just going to start with that. And I was a little worried because the opening shot was a tad blurry. And I'm like, well, that's just not a great look. But I figured the pros outweigh the cons in that scenario. And I'll go with the thing that's the most unique. And it worked in my favor. And I figured, okay, that worked last year. I'll do something similar this year. And I didn't want to start with the opening night package, but I had it in the first 2 minutes. And I had a field hockey stretch because I figured not a lot of people would have that. I had a radio basketball stretch because I figured while I want to be different, I also want to show that I can call a legitimate, not that field hockey is not legitimate, but a lot of people are going to have radio play-by-play specifically for basketball. And I want to show that I can do that too, and I'm not just an odd sports guy. So that was my thought process going into this reel, and we do have a countdown, 2 minutes remaining, so we will start this up again in 2 minutes if we get cut off. So thank you, Luke, for liking the reel. Another question from the father. You have traveled a lot over the summers and with school. What is the best place you went to work a game? Louisville, Kentucky was outstanding. I did that with my friend Jack this year. We called Syracuse Louisville football. And the food in that stadium is unreal. Not that the food at the Carrier Dome, I guess not the Carrier Dome anymore, but the food at the Dome wasn't, not that it's not good, but the food in Louisville is pretty exceptional. They had a station just for, oh goodness, what was it? Sirloin, and you would go to different stations of this buffet. So you start at the salad bar, and then you go to the pasta section, and they had all these different types of pastas, and you have a whole dessert section, and it was incredible. It was really, really cool. And very filling. And you always want to be full before a broadcast. And did you always tell your parents about your trips? No, I did not always tell my parents about my trips. I think the first trip I ever went to was Duke for lacrosse, and